What happens when you take an 18-team fantasy draft of the best baseball players of all time and put them into MLB The Show in an ultra-competitive fantasy showdown? It's the Legends League!
Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Legends League podcast. I'm Spencer Silva, the general manager of the fake Oakland Athletics.
I'm Bobby Ray, the commissioner of the Legends League.
And I'm Hunter Pedersen, manager of the San Francisco Giants in the Legends League.
And each week we are going to be discussing the goings-on of the Legends League, which I am going to have Bobby Ray explain to all of you who are uninitiated.
So the Legends League is a fantasy baseball league simulated entirely through the MLB The Show 20 game engine. Just to step back and look at the history a little bit, back before the Major League Baseball season started, we were doing our draft for our home league, which is called Playing for Keeps, a dynasty league that we've been running for 10 years now. And it didn't look like we were going to have baseball for a while, so I decided to upload everybody's fantasy rosters into MLB The Show so I could play through a franchise mode and see, just simulate how the season would go if these were actual teams, pitching and playing defense and whatnot. And I kind of put the word out and asked if everybody would be interested in following along, and there was a lot of interest. So I went ahead and started streaming games on Twitch and updating everybody with box scores after the games. After a couple weeks of this, it was really apparent that it was way more fun than it had any reason to be watching entirely fake baseball played by a computer. But it turns out this is a really, really fun method of doing sim fantasy baseball. So once we got about halfway through running our home league's simulation, it kind of clicked for me like, well, wait a minute, we could do this with a roster of all of the greatest players in the history of baseball. So we put out the word, we got 18 general managers who were interested in drafting teams, and we did the most epic draft of any sport of any kind that I've ever seen. We drafted from a player pool of 2,500 players, again, filling out 18 teams with full 26-man rosters. And now we've been going through the season. We're about 10% of the way through the year, and we're streaming games every day live on Twitch. And there's tons of content out on YouTube now. And I'm so pleased with how it's going.
And Bobby, real quick before we move on, do you want to plug the Twitter handle for the Legends League pod, or Legends League / also the Legends League podcast, because we're very DIY around here, and everything is going to be as simple and bundled together as possible.
That's right. So everything is under the handle PFK The Show. So you can find us at PFK The Show on Twitter, Twitch TV / PFK The Show. And we're also on YouTube. You can search for PFK The Show. PFK stands for Playing for Keeps.
Awesome. So now let's dig into the standings.
Absolutely. So another thing that I should probably bring up right now is that, we've got 18 teams of actual general managed rosters, and then we've got the other 12 teams from Major League Baseball. So after we did our fantasy draft, I then went through with all the remaining players and divided them up amongst the remaining 12 teams into what we've been referring to as the cupcakes. Think of them as out-of-division opponents for like a college football team, right? Sometimes you're going to play South Dakota State and you're going to win by 50-3, right? That's what we thought, at least. But so far this year, it's turned out that the cupcakes are extremely formidable, and we have one of them, the Arizona Diamondbacks, actually leading their division in the NL West. So through 10% of the season, we've got a couple teams standing out as absolute stalwarts. The St. Louis Cardinals in the NL Central are 14-3. The Detroit Tigers in the AL Central are 13-2. And then there's a handful of teams around 10 wins or so. We saw some really troublingly slow starts for a couple of the teams that got drafted in the first week, but for the most part, everything's evened out, and everybody is kind of charging towards a 500 average at the moment. Anything else for standings you guys want to hear?
I think I'm good on standings. I think one of the things that we should probably mention also about the quote-unquote cupcakes is that they are filled with nearly Hall of Fame players, and some of them
right.
have Hall of Fame players. So one of the things that we're kind of exploring is like, how much of a difference is there between a player who is an 88 overall that is a Hall of Famer in a great situation versus the guy who is a 92 or whatever? Is there really that much of a difference? Like the Twins, for example, in the AL Central have Andy Messersmith, who seems to be throwing shutouts all the damn time.
He's been incredible.
And Jim Cat, who will probably eventually be elected into the Hall of Fame by the what is it, the Legends Committee or whatever when they do the retrospectives.
Right.
Cool. And I guess let's move on to the next thing. So the first thing we're going to talk about is we're going to do a little bit of a draft recap and go through the first round and see which players ended up being worth where they were drafted, and then we'll move on to talking about our favorite team, some of our favorite picks, and all the other stuff. So who wants to kick us off with talking a little bit about your favorite first round pick, who you think has been the best so far?
I'll go ahead. So just to kind of give people a recap, when you looked at I gave all of the participants a big Excel spreadsheet that had every player's overall rating, and that was just about all the information that everybody had. Everybody was asking for some screen grabs of the actual attributes under the hood from the MLB The Show game engine, but for the most part, we're mostly going just off of overall. And when you looked at the overall ratings of these players and a little bit under the hood, it really became apparent that there were like 5 or 6 guys who were just superfluously good, and then a whole bunch of guys who are, of course, Hall of Famers. But for me, the big interest in the first round was really the front end of the draft, especially because we had an 18-team snake draft going on. So if you're drafting second, like Hunter was with his Giants, you're waiting a long time until you're picking your second player. So if we look back, Ken Griffey Jr. was our first pick going to the Mariners, first overall. Willie Mays to the Giants at second, which was just perfect. I'm so happy you got Mays there. Babe Ruth went to the Cardinals at 3, Barry Bonds to the Brewers at 4, and Hammer and Hank Aaron to the Orioles at 5. That, along with Mickey Mantle and a couple other guys, were really, really the cream of the crop. And what we've seen so far is that actually none of those guys are living up to their billing. Barry Bonds has been pretty good. His on base is at 409 and his slugging is at 673, but his batting average is a shade under 300. And most importantly, his team isn't winning. The Milwaukee Brewers have absolutely been struggling in the very stacked NL Central. Let me pull up their record. Yeah, they're only 5-11 so far. So even with Barry Bonds being the best performing of those first 5 picks, he's still not carrying his team to victories. So that's something that really stands out to me.
And one of the things that I'm kind of looking at is some of the surprises that I actually thought were overdrafted have turned out to be great so far. Like I thought Joe DiMaggio, who went at 9th overall, had no business going at 9 overall. And I actually thought that the Tigers were a little hot at 7 going for Mickey Mantle, not because Mickey Mantle isn't one of the greatest players of all time, but Mickey Mantle's stats, at least, when I looked under the hood, they didn't look like they were quite on the level of some of the other players. And then, I mean, really, a lot of the first rounders are really not living up to the hype so far.
They are.
I guess to kind of just like the outliers really so far is Babe Ruth is, right around the Mendoza line, slashing 215, 254, 385. My pick, Honus Wagner, is at hitting 203. So that's not great. Satchel Paige, who I thought had maybe the best stats of any pitcher in the draft, has a 4.44 ERA and 152 WHIP in 24 innings. But I'm sure all of this stuff will even out soon. But it's just kind of interesting to look at the first round and see who's producing and who's not so far.
Yeah, I do think there's some other fun game mechanics here. Obviously, anybody who's been a hardcore fantasy baseball person knows that, there's under the hood things we look for in fantasy baseball. And obviously within this sim, I know Spencer, myself, and Bobby are always very interested in, why are certain things happening this certain way. So I'll be really interested to follow this throughout, besides just the cupcakes, obviously packing up, but, will some of these, picks in the 40s and 50s end up being better than the first overall pick?
Right.
It's going to be a really interesting thing to follow. Ken Griffey's obviously got a lot of weight on his shoulder there,
Right.
but everyone, like you mentioned, is the names that we get to go through in this episode are going to be insane. So,
well, and we have to all be prepared for it because
right.
In the sim that Bobby mentioned earlier between just our fantasy baseball league, one of the biggest mashers in the entire game, who outperformed almost everyone, was on my team, who's Keston Hiura, the second baseman for the Milwaukee Brewers. And Hiura, like, I think he nearly led the league in batting, hit like 40 home runs, and he was an 82 overall, which is nowhere near the territory of where someone should be producing at that level.
And big clutch playoff magic too. I mean, he hit some huge bombs.
Keston huge bombs as he came to be known.
Right.
Yeah. So let's transition to the draft recap, and I want to hear about each of your favorite teams. So Bobby, you go first. Tell me who your favorite team of the draft was, or who you thought the best team was.
Well, I did a divisional preview series that you can find on YouTube. Again, that's at PFK The Show. And I kind of planted my flag early because I was really impressed by the Tigers draft, and their roster has certainly proved to be kicking it so far with their 13-2 record. For me, the Tigers built a roster that has no weaknesses. When you look around their lineup, just every single position on the diamond has star power. He's got Robin Yount at short, Joey Votto at first, Mickey Mantle in center, Christian Yelich in right, JD Martinez as a DH, Eddie Matthews at third, Robinson Cano at second, Jose Canseco in left, and Jorge Posada at catcher. It's like every single one of those guys could win you the game by themselves if they go off. When you've got 9 of them in a row together, it's just too much. Plus, what I think that the Tigers did really well in the draft is they drafted a bunch of guys who all worked vicious at bats. Everybody's got a really high discipline rating in this game, which means they're going to be taking a lot of pitches. And they also have really high vision, which is a stat that in MLB The Show basically allows you to make more reliable contact, including fouling off pitches if you're in a tough spot. So before the season even got started, I predicted that these guys were going to be grinding through pitchers and just raising pitch counts by the 4th inning. And sure enough, that's exactly what's happened. Add to that the fact that rather than drafting for maybe the highest overall players for their bench, the Tigers really went out and got weapons. They got Bernie Williams, a great all-around defensive outfield replacement, Scott Rowland for a great corner infielder, Jason Varitek's a great backup catcher, and then the absolute weapon, Trey Turner, who has one of the best pinch running stats of anybody in the whole game. And then you add to that their pitching rotation goes Sandy Koufax, Jose Fernandez, Steven Strasburg, Fernando Valenzuela, and Walker Buehler. And yeah, the Tigers are my favorite team from the draft.
Yeah, they're going to be something to deal with, that's for sure. And I actually wanted to. I'm not going to choose the Tigers just to be a little alternative here. But what I'm going to say is that they did have, in my opinion, maybe the best draft and maybe the best pick. And insofar as they do have any weakness that I was able to delineate, it's that they are pretty heavy on lefty bats. So they got Votto, Yelich, Cano, Eddie Matthews, and then a couple of switch hitters who actually both hit lefties quite well. And I feel like if you have to pick a single nit with this lineup, it's that I could see them getting dominated by someone like Sandy Koufax, who is on their team, of course. So that but alas, that's like the only small quibble that I would have with that roster. My pick was the Padres. The Padres are managed by my oldest friend, Michael Reiser, and we grew up in the Bay Area together. And so I'm probably a little biased here, but he picked a lot of my favorite players, including Tim Raines and Joe Morgan, who were both guys that he sniped from me. But alas, one of the things that he did is that he very early in the draft snagged both Dennis Eckersley and Raleigh Fingers, who were 2 of the only 99 relief pitchers, and they have just impossible stats. Basically in every category you can think of, they are almost maxed out. And in particular, Dennis Eckersley. And I just really think that towards at least in the box scores that I've been seeing, it looks like a lot of these games that we're simming are really close. And it seems like having those separator relievers could make a huge difference for him. And I think especially in the playoffs, it's going to be devastating. And with his combination of speed and contact and with power in the right spots, I think he's going to be really tough to deal with.
Agreed.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And he also got him as Oakland A's, which, is extra dirt in your face.
Yeah, extra.
I think as we were drafting with these Legends teams, especially if you're from the area, you felt a need to defend some of your players. I I don't think I have him even as one of my picks, but I know Willie McCovey has been just raking, and it's been driving me bonkers as a Giants fan.
Yeah, well, and one of the other small components that I completely didn't pay enough attention to, and if you're a really savvy player of the show, you would know that one of the morale factors that allows players to level up a little bit, or at least maintain their level of production, is the region statistic. And so by the Padres grabbing a bunch of players from California who also happen, like Dennis Eckersley, who's from the Bay Area, not only is it a thumb in my eye because the A's are my favorite team, but also he is from California, which means that it's likely that he's going to play up to his enormous stats because he's happy and to be in his home state. So there's another little extra.
Yeah, I don't think my team won't come as much of a surprise. Again, kind of looking on the leaderboard, I picked the Cardinals, who was drafted by Brianna, Bobby's girlfriend. Sitting there looking through the team, I think this team for me, it's just dripping with like my fun brand of brand name players. Ichiro, Manny Ramirez, David Ortiz, Mark McGuire. I mean, that's just a crazy 1, 2, 3, 4. And I think,
and don't forget Babe Ruth.
Yeah, not to mention Babe Ruth sitting there.
She's got some nice drip.
Roger Maris. Yeah, I mean, really fun. Ozzie Smith, I mean, really some players that I think, if you went out and surveyed somebody on the street that maybe, and I don't mean this as a knocking way, didn't know that much about baseball, they would still know every single name or most of the names on this roster. And I think that's really fun when you're watching a game. The entertainment factor, Dizzy Dean on the pitching staff, big unit. Was her first pitcher off the board. Randy Johnson's probably the most fun to watch in this game of any pitcher. So I think it's just a really, really fun team to watch because of that kind of name brandness. And then obviously it's been working out really well. I think she either has or is tied for the best record in the game right now. I'm cheating a little bit. I did write in a second pick here. I know you guys mentioned your favorite teams. And I think I mentioned this a little bit in our pre-chat. But my second favorite team is the Braves, and mostly because of the pitching staff. But this is by our friend Alex Terrence that drafted the team, who kind of went with the super staff strategy. So instead of getting 3 aces, he got 5 aces. I think Dazzy Vance is his worst pitcher, and I still think I could be wrong, Bobby, but I think he has either 99 velocity or 99K, some, one of those like godlike stats to come out, 95K and a 99 velocity. So somebody who you never want to see on the mound, and that's his 5th guy coming up every day, is a pretty scary strategy. The pitching hasn't worked out exactly as he wanted, but he also has a lot of old timey super contact guys on his roster. So, pitchers that can strike you out and keep guys off base, and then just guys that'll get on, from Eddie Collins to Al Kaline, who is one of my best picks of the draft. Don Mattingly, Nomar Garciaparra, who keeps playing and keeps doing well, despite
not being in his starting lineup. That's another point.
Some of these fun subs that happen when you have a deep bench like he does too, that just kind of keep coming around. But anyways, I think if he had one weakness, I think he doesn't have any lefties in his bullpen, if I remember correct. And that kind of thing I think was interesting to watch. I think Spencer mentioned it earlier. I think the only lefty on his staff is Warren Spahn. So if he's playing a team if he's playing the Tigers, for example, who has a bunch of left-handed hitters, the split advantage is probably going to have them mashing off his staff, and he's not really going to have, an Aroldis Chapman or something to counter that with. Where I think most people tried to, or if they were paying attention to, tried to pick up maybe one ace lefty reliever. I know I did, jumping early at Josh Hader, just to make sure that I had something to counter some of these legendary left-handed hitters that there are in the game.
Yeah, that was a big part of my strategy. I have like 6 or 7 lefties on my team because I really thought I would have to milk every part of that platoon advantage that I could. Anyways, that's I love your guys' picks. Let's move on to our favorite picks of the draft.
Picks of the draft.
Bobby, let's start with your favorite picks.
All right. My favorite pick, which wasn't even my favorite pick at the time, but really has shown up to be one of the leading bashers in the league is Mark McGuire for the Cardinals, who fell to the 111th overall pick, the third pick of the 7th round. His power versus both right-hand and left-handed pitchers is maxed out at 99. His vision stat is pretty low at 51. Again, that's going to allow him to maintain counts by fouling pitches off, and so it's a really, really valuable stat. And what you notice is that guys with low vision tend to strike out a lot more. It's the same thing with Ken Griffey Jr. His one weakness is in his vision. But Big Mac is absolutely crushing it so far. He's come up huge in a lot of live stream game for the Cardinals. And when he hits bombs, they just look like Mac bombs. And it's just so much fun. He's triple slashing 444, 500, 963 to start the year. How about that? So that's my top pick. My second favorite pick was the Rays grabbing Roberto Clemente at 52 overall, which was the 16th pick of the 3rd round. Clemente was a really weird lesson in the unreliability of the overall stat in this game. So there's a whole bunch of factors that go into how the game actually spits out the overall rating of how good you are. And Roberto Clemente is a 98. But when you look under the hood at the relevant stats, he's an absolutely elite fielder. He's an elite bat. He's really fast. I have no idea why he's not a 99, because he very well could have gone in the first round when you just look at, again, that under the hood kind of rating. And yet just because he had that 98 overall next to his name in the spreadsheet, he fell to the end of the 3rd round. I thought it was a steal. Then in the middle rounds, the Orioles grabbed with the 212th pick, Rafael Palmeiro. And I know that an all-around game 5-tool first baseman isn't exactly where you're wanting to be putting all your eggs, but when you're taking your 12th pick off the board, you can grab somebody like that. And I don't get why Rafael Palmeiro fell so far. Maybe a lot of people already had a good first baseman lined up, or they knew that the position was deep and they could get a slugger later. But Palmeiro has been just absolutely stellar for the Orioles so far on both sides of the ball, and he's one of my favorite players. I just think it's great that he's there in Baltimore. And then finally, my bonus favorite pick, which I don't even know if on the value it was the best pick, but it was just amazing for how he did it. But the Blue Jays took Jackie Robinson with the 6th pick of the 3rd round, which was the 42nd overall pick in our draft. And it just doesn't get any better than that. So I got to give it up to Tony on that.
That's how you knew the draft was blessed. I think it's interesting in your four picks, Bobby, McGuire, Clemens, Palmeiro, and Jackie Robinson. I do think that there's also, you got to understand, you have 18 diehard baseball fans drafting this Legends League. You want to look at these rosters all the time. And I almost wonder if, at least for Big Mac and Palmeiro, there isn't some, steroids biased or Congress testimonial bias of not necessarily wanting Palmeiro to maybe be the guy you go with after he kind of ended his career and a little bit with his tail between his legs. And then obviously on the other side of the coin, Clemente and Jackie Robinson, probably, two of the most influential players ever to play the game. Certainly in Jackie Robinson, and obviously the Clemente Award is still given out for, the player who does the most for his community every year. So,
right.
Definitely you're kind of on all spectrums of how people would judge kind of moral character there.
Right. That's funny.
Yeah. And Palmeiro, we always have to note with Palmeiro that he has a lot of nice little moss hanging off the back of his neck, which is always like peak moss, 80 grade moss. I think the only other 80 grade moss that I can think of is probably John Kruk, who I don't think anybody drafted. You can't even see his moss in the profile picture there. That's a little
Juan
sad.
Gonzalez has got a pretty good mullet going too.
Oh, he's got some moss. Anyway, let's transition to my favorite picks.
Yeah.
Because I want to talk about them. I think Jose Fernandez was maybe my pick of the draft. And not only just because RIP, I love you, Jose Fernandez, and you're one of my all-time favorite pitchers. But one of the things that is really cool is that not only does he have banana stats, like 99 velocity and 99 break, but he also has really high morale because he apparently doesn't care about his role. So he is not the ace on his staff, and his expectation is to be depth on the team. So he's ecstatic about his role right now. And he's got like plus 10 morale, even though he's like one of the greatest pitchers ever. So that's bananas to me.
That's wild.
Yeah, that's that's one of those things where obviously uh, no one knew that. It's not like he was chosen for that reason, but it just turned out to be a nice little added bonus for someone who took one of the greatest pitchers ever who left us much too soon. And then next, I picked Bob Feller for the Braves. And it's not necessarily that I love Bob Feller, even though I do kind of love Bob Feller. But he was drafted in the 6th round, the 94th pick overall. And I picked Phil Niekro, just who's like a 97, a few picks before, and I'm just committed to Uncle Phil because he's my guy, and I wanted to troll everyone and have a knuckleball ace. But anyways, Bob Feller was just like sitting there, and everybody was looking at him through the draft, right? Everybody was like, "Oh gosh, I just Bob Feller looks nasty. He's got 99, a 99 K stat." He's got insane stamina. His velocity's off the charts, but he has 46 on the walks, so 46 out of 100. So you're anticipating that he's going to walk a lot of people. But anyways, he was the most talented pitcher on the board for like a full round at least. And Alex snagged him after already having 2 insane aces in front of him. And I just think that was like one of the coups of the draft, and it really annoys me.
Side note on that one is, so I'm commissionering this league, and I don't actually have a team of my own, which allows me to kind of sit back and enjoy everybody's team and get a lot from behind the scenes. And when I first proposed the Legends League to Alex, who's managing the Braves, the first person he mentioned to me was Bob Feller. And he regales me with the history of what a badass Bob Feller was, going off to fight in the war and then coming back and dominating. So it gave me a big smile inside when Alex was able to snag him towards the 100th overall pick.
I think we might have to rain on Alex's parade there a little bit. I think Bob Feller wasn't quite the war hero that Ted Williams was, but
oh my.
Yeah, we'll delve into that at a different time.
Yeah, I do think as a side effect of all this, one of the most fun things about this league has been delving into the history of the game in a way that I haven't gotten to before.
Yeah.
The draft was a long form draft that ended up going much quicker than we anticipated because everyone was so excited about it. But you had about 2 hours to do research each pick, and times up by 18, you had some time to sit around and look at some of these names you might not know and might not know their backstory. So I found myself on a lot of Wikipedia pages instead of stat pages, just reading about people's personalities to see if I, wanted to be team, Feller, or be in somebody's camp.
Our Discord chat, where everybody was discussing their picks, was filled with all sorts of amazing anecdotes. And somehow my girlfriend is in the league, and she drafted Wade Boggs, and somehow I did not know about the Wade Boggs challenge until this league started. So it's beyond my comprehension as a lifelong baseball fan that I did not know about Wade Boggs drinking between 50 and 60 beers on a single plane flight. And so anyway, so on to my next favorite pick, Johnny Mize. Johnny Mize, so a lot of for background, this offseason, maybe like some of you out there read Joe Posnanski's Baseball 100, where he wrote 3,000-4,000 word essays about his top 100 baseball players ever in 100 consecutive days, and ended up being more than that because global pandemic intervened and best laid plans and such. But anyways, one of the names that I didn't know on the Baseball 100 was Johnny Mize, and he was such a masher, and he was kind of overlooked because he didn't become famous until he played for the Yankees. He was more of like a part-time player towards the end of his career, and he would just mash really clutch home runs for those great Yankees teams in the 50s, I think, and maybe late 40s and 50s. But anyways, he was just a monster, and I had a lot of fun learning about him. And he is absolutely freaking raking in the Legends League so far. He has 91 contact and 98 power against right-handed hitters, which is, I think he might be the biggest platoon masher in the entire game. And he went in the 7th round, the 114th pick overall, which is kind of bananas to me. And then just to round it off, I thought I'm going to take a 2 here. I thought that some of the shortstops that went in the later rounds, not in the later rounds, but like in the middle of the draft, Alan Trammell went to the Brewers in the 10th round, and Willie Wells, who was a Negro League shortstop, went to the Padres in the 12th round, and they both are stacked and they're having great seasons. And they're great all-around players. And I actually, having seen them play and looked at their stats, I prefer them to a lot of the shortstops that were going 3 or 4 rounds earlier. And I thought those were both huge coups in my opinion. So Hunter, you want to give us yours?
Yeah, I'll jump into it. You guys took most of the good ones. Well, I'll go kind of quick.
Yeah.
My first one,
You're going to start off with your own.
My own. Yeah, you saw the notes.
Your own draft pick, of course.
Much of that type of personality that I am. Tony Gwynn was just a player that I think, as I think about the best players that I can think of, was really fun to get at 71. Obviously, 99 contact, 99 vision, 99 clutch kind of guy. Also with some good speed and base running. They kind of got the young Gwynn, not the heftier Mr. Padre Gwynn. But anyways, just really, really fun to have a guy that I don't have to worry about plugging in as a leadoff guy for every single game. And I was excited about that. Duplicate Tony Gwynn type pick was Wade Boggs for me at 99. Again, I think, to get 99 contact both sides plus 99 vision, plus 95 clutch, plus 96 disc. I mean, he's almost maxed out in every hitter stat you want except for power. Obviously the speed isn't there. The defense is okay at third. But again, as far as a bat, a number 2 hitter, or a number 5, 6 hitter, you can do a lot worse than Wade Boggs, which again, right around the pick 100 was a lot of value there.
And Boggs is also one of those guys that you were talking about earlier, Bobby, where if you just looked at overall, he's only a 90, but almost all of his hitting stats, except for the power, are maxed out. So you can anticipate that he's going to perform much better than, your other, like some other run-of-the-mill 90.
Right. He reads almost like a 99. I think I honestly think that pick was when I started to understand that there were some stats that I almost wanted to be low when Bobby sent me a screenshot of somebody, because it meant that it was dragging his overall value down and I was getting value in the places that I needed it.
Like you didn't want that 99 drag bunting stat,
right? I'll even skip ahead and come backwards in picks. But David Ortiz ended up going at 250. And this is sort of, I think, after the second night of our draft, and Brianna got him right before I would have drafted him, although I at that point had already committed to a pitcher because I needed a fifth starter. But 99 clutch, 91 power versus right-hander, 96 contact versus right-hander. Obviously, no speed, no defense. But to get him, basically on one of the last guys you can grab, and to have, okay, if you have a right-handed pitcher, which is still 70 probably more percent in the league based on old-timey pitching, was just incredible value to me. That the hitting stats are up there, with the top 2 rounds. I think this is like round 21 or 23. So I thought that was great value. And by the end, that's sort of, I was almost looking at some negative stat attribution as a way to try to hunt and grab, to try to find people low in one way or another. One guy who wasn't low in any ways, I think Bobby mentioned a lot of people had hit him up. I know I had in multiple rounds, was Al Kaline, who kept falling, and then eventually landed as a huge value, I think, for the Braves. Is that
right? Braves at 166 overall.
And again, it's hard to par Al Kaline away from a Mickey Mantle type stat. You know what I mean? They're not that dissimilar. If you look across the board, and the fielding to boot, it really just this was an absolute steal and an embarrassment to, I think, the rest of the managers who were asking about him, didn't do anything, and were hoping that maybe he'd fall one more round. Maybe he'll fall one more round, and just by the end, it was like, oh my God, how has nobody taken out Kaline?
In the defense of the rest of us, I think Alex has the least diverse team, and I think a lot of us were trying to pick Negro League players, or trying to have players from other countries, and Alex, I think, really profited off of just having the before integration white guys who just absolutely raked. And there's a few more on the wire if he wants more of those guys that are 99 contact and 0 power.
Yeah, that's a good point. He did end up getting Sarhandra O, Who was the
Sotoharu, or Santiago, as Ves Gershon likes to call him in the game.
Sorry, yeah,
He
yeah.
just calls him Santiago.
Oh, some of the name pronounce that's good. Anyways, that was his one, and I think his best power hitter is the Japanese home run hitter.
Yeah, and
But
O mashes.
but
Yeah, he's great.
but you're right. Other than that, he went old timey contact guys, and Al Kaline really ended up being the gem of, I think, all of his fielders. I think he's his best position player, and again, to get at 166 and to have his kind of pitching heavy strategy worked out really well. And then I just wanted to give a shout out to Tim Lincecum at 59 to the Padres. Michael Reiser special. But this was the first one. I think this was towards the end of the first day when I sort of started realizing that we had to start flying down that sort of overall number list to get players we wanted. Lincecum, obviously, probably my favorite or second favorite Giant of all time. Again, it was a shot through my heart. I know there were other managers in the league, our friend David Baldwin, who would have reached on him, but I don't think it's actually. I don't know. He's been good. He's been good, but even beyond that, just the entertainment factor of watching kind of your favorite player, especially when some of this is so splitting hairs from a stat perspective. That was the pick that I think woke me up to start chopping down on a guy like Tony Gwynn, and I think a lot of people on day two started realizing, oh shit, like if you want a guy, you got to go get him.
It was get your guy season, that's for sure. So I think really quickly, we are getting towards the end of our time here. So quickly, do you guys want to say anything anymore about trends that you thought were interesting in the draft, or if no, make it very fast?
Yeah, absolutely. So there were a few trends. There were runs on both kinds of pitching when you'd see a reliever go and then you'd see a bunch of relievers go. Same thing with starting pitching. I didn't see those kind of runs with any other position. But the thing that absolutely dominated this draft for me was it was ultra competitive from front to back. People were getting their picks sniped in the 23rd round, which you don't see in fantasy drafts of other types. So that was the big trend to me, is that this was a really sharp room. Like you said, we've got 18 players who really know what they're talking about with baseball, and it showed because this draft was vicious.
Yeah, I think that
Super vicious.
I think both learning through the draft that, oh shit, I need to be even better as I was picking, because people were being so sharp, and even in early trade talks and things after the league, I think that's absolutely a good call out. It's just I've learned how smart this league is, and it's going to be fun and competitive because of that. I think that's the only way to do something like this, to honor it, is to have some really good players in it.
Yeah, and it actually, I feel like in most fantasy drafts, it's an advantage to be at one of the two ends in a fantasy draft, because we did it snake style, which is the only fair way to do it. And I was the last pick. I was number 18, and I found that I thought and I did get some value, but I was anticipating a lot more value would come my way. Instead, it was just a landmine of manager after manager just taking the guy that I wanted right before me, and me scrambling to figure out who the heck I wanted.
I think there was one round where you had sent me like 5 different guys that you were ready to pick, and then one by one they get knocked down by like the 6 or 7 guys before you, and it was actually funny.
Yeah, I think it happened like 2 or 3 times where I had like 4 picks ready, and all of them went right before my turn. So alas, I like my team. My pitching is the big question mark, and I'm sure we'll all talk about our teams a lot over the course of this podcast. So nobody wants to hear us roster bait on in their ears. Anyways, let's pick division winners. Just do a quick round, go through and tell me your favorites. Who do you think is going to win the NL East, Bobby?
NL East, I planted my flag in the Braves real early, and I'm sticking with it. At first, I was really impressed with, like you were talking about, Alex was really sticking to a theme with his team, going for old-timey players, and it wasn't just a aesthetic theme. It was actually a strategy theme, because like we were talking about, he doesn't have much pop, but every single person on that roster is an on-base machine. So that lineup is just going to turn over like crazy, and more importantly, he can pitch, and everybody can play defense. So it's really a cohesive strategy from front to back on that team, and I think it's going to take him to a pennant.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Braves are going to win. I think if there's a question mark on that team, I think it's actually more in the bullpen, because he's got mostly starters in his bullpen. And I think that might not go so well for him, especially given what I have experienced with the AI managers and seeming to prefer the high stamina players, even if they don't have the best stats to put out the fire. But I think overall, he's got the best team in that division. And I also have experience with the other two managers in the NL East, which are Charlie, shout out to Charlie, who is the Phillies manager, and David, who is the Nationals manager. And they have a tendency to violently oppose one another in our other fantasy leagues in their battles for the bottom of the
I
standings.
love, yeah, I really do love this division because of that
That's
rivalry, though, by the way.
that is a consistent rivalry, and they are always in for the battle of bad. And so I love both of you guys, but keep on keeping on. Anyways, Hunter, who's your choice?
Yeah, I'm gonna stay consistent on this first one, not to be milquetoast, but it's the Braves for the reasons why I kind of picked them earlier. And I think you're right. If there is a weakness, it probably comes down to bullpen and left-handed relievers specifically for me. If I was to, be managing that team, that's what I would be looking to upgrade before it caught up with me.
Right, NL Central, Bobby, to you.
Oh, I'm going to be kind of surprising here, and I'm going to take the Brewers. The Brewers are only 5-11 right now, which is 8.5 games out of first place, but we still got 90% of the season left to play, and they've got Barry Bonds in that lineup. The Cardinals and the Pirates are both looking like absolute world beaters right now, and I think it would be really easy to peg either of them as a runaway winner with this division. But when I look under the hood at stats and see who's overperforming and underperforming, like nobody on the Brewers who's supposed to be doing great is doing well yet. And that roster, I think, might be the most complete front to back in the division. So I really think that we've seen an aberration in the early going here, and I think that Milwaukee's going to be absolutely deadly. And I think the motivation of this slow start is going to have Paul, who is managing the Brewers, actually be doing a little bit more working with his roster than the other two might, who don't want to mess with a good thing. And I think that might actually end up working for him over the course of 162.
I am gonna go with the Cardinals because I just think they have the magic. They have the funnest players on that team, and like how can you not root for the team that's got Ichiro and Big Mac and Babe Ruth and Randy Johnson? It's just too much fun. And I think that Paul doesn't give enough shits about morale yet. Maybe he will, and I think that's gonna crater his team.
Yeah, I'm obviously also on the Cardinals Magic bandwagon, but just to reiterate, I wouldn't sleep on the Pirates. I really like their roster. I think he got some good late picks. Adam is a guy who maybe favors, again, in our other 10-year dynasty league that we've been in with, maybe favors fun over some other managers. But in the simulated baseball, kind of anything can happen. I think some of that magic just kind of happened. So I would definitely watch out for the Pirates. I kind of have them as a wild card team in my slot.
And Frank Thomas is just absolutely
Oh
mashing,
my
which is
God.
really fun.
Yeah.
I mean, Adam also has like the Central Division is super fun. It's like it's got a bunch of really fun teams.
I think the Big Hurt is on pace for like 90 home runs.
That's not bad.
That's
It's
all right.
accurate. It's accurate.
All right, on to the NL West.
Okay, for me, I think that Hunter, your Giants are going to win this division. I think that this is I've labeled this the division of death in the NL. To borrow a soccer term, because the Padres, the Dodgers, and the Giants are all really complete teams. I think that this is the closest race that comes down to the wire, and I do think that one of the teams, if not both of the other teams from this division, end up taking wild cards. But I'm going to give the advantage to the team that has the best single player, which is Willie Mays, and the best bench depth, which is what the Giants have, especially running with a couple platoons and having some good weapons off the bench. And Willie Mays hasn't even turned on the bat yet. So I think that the Giants are going to run away with it. Not run away with this one, but eke out a victory.
Yeah, I don't share that belief. I am gonna go with the Padres just because, like I outlined earlier, I love their lineup. They got Bullet Rogan and Satchel Paige at the top of their rotation, which is disgusting, and just a lights out bullpen. And I think with their combination of speed and power, I think that they're just gonna, maybe not. I think they might get shut out at times, and who knows how they'll do in the playoffs. But I think over the course of a 162 game season, I think that's going to be a pretty nice little advantage that they're going to have. And I think that the Giants or the Dodgers will probably be the wild card team in the NL. So I expect it to be a very tight division, and especially if like the freaking cupcake diamonds keep absolutely laying it on everyone.
Yeah,
But that's smoke and mirrors.
can I pick the
That's smoke and
can I
mirrors.
pick the
Yeah.
Diamondbacks who drafted after these 18 brilliant managers drafted their entire teams?
Yeah.
AI simulated Diamondbacks. Yeah, they no, I I hope that they don't keep crushing us with Chuck Knobloch and Steve Finley, but you know, again, I think they do have some situational guys who are just raking and doing well. I think my Giants are going to have an advantage, but it's a really close division. This one's really hard for me to unbiasedly say, hey, I'm better than the Dodgers or the Padres setup here. I think we all have different strategies, which is interesting.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think it'll be a wild one, and we all have some pretty strong strengths. You know, whether it's a big three-headed monster at the top of a rotation, or you know, a big hammer at the back of the bullpen, or you know, power throughout or contact throughout. So I think it's a really fun, interesting matchups, and I mean, God, all these games are just so much fun to watch. So
Yeah.
you know.
All right, on to the AL East. Bobby.
AL East, I'm going to go for another shock pick here, and I'm going to go with the Orioles, who are currently in the basement of the AL East. I've flipped around on who my favorite team in this division is 3 times now, picking each of them as my favorite because this is my division of death in the American League. I think that this is just as close as the NL West. And again, I'm gonna give the advantage to the depth and the best player. Hank Aaron has only been hitting 239. And 2 of the picks that the Orioles are really relying on, Andrew Miller and Mariano Rivera, have barely even pitched this season. Andrew Miller's only pitched 2/3 of an inning, and Rivera has had some really bad luck in his 2 2/3. So you have 2 of their best players just removed from the game so far. I think that look turns around. I think Hammer and Hank Aaron starts launching bombs, and I think that ends up being too much over the course of that full season for these other teams who rely a bit more on pitching. While I think that the Orioles are just going to be mashing all year long.
And that is indeed a hot take because the Orioles are currently 6-11 and at the bottom of the standings behind 2 of the cupcake teams. So that's a I like it hot, and that's a nice hot take for me. Yeah, I am personally going to go with the Blue Jays. The Blue Jays they also have a pretty fun team, and I hate to admit it because the Blue Jays manager just talks so much trash in the Discord about his team and everybody else's teams, and I really don't want to pick him, but his team's great. Anyway, I mean, having the 1-2 punch of Tom Seaver and Roger Clemens at the top of any rotation is a pretty gnarly thing to contend with, and the rest of the roster, from what I remember, is really solid overall. How about you, Hunter?
I'll just to be contrarian, I'll go Rays. I think this is another division that I can kind of see anything happen, but you know, Greg Maddux, Sale, Smoltz, Billy Wagner at the back of his bullpen, you know, Posey. It's a fun mix of kind of all-time great Hall of Famers and a lot of current stars. You know, Cody Bellinger was an early pick, who's got really great you know, one-sided platoon stats, or you know, pretty balanced, I guess, overall, but has some, you know, there are some killers, one-sided killers on this team. As well as some good depth. You know, the pitching staff is deep. The bullpen's pretty good. And he has some fun utility knife players like Merrifield and Zobrist, who I think are going to come in and help, you know, spell some of those things along. So.
And Smoltz and Maddox have not been very good so far, and either has A-Rod. So there's a lot of opportunity for growth for that team for sure. Okay, and AL Central. I have a feeling we're probably all going to pick the same team for the AL Central. Who do you going with, Bobby?
Yeah, no surprises here. My planted flag from the beginning of the season is the Detroit Tigers, and until they prove otherwise, I'm going to keep with them as my World Series pick. They're 13-2. They've scored 100 runs and only allowed 54, which is gnarly. Yeah, I don't see any sign of them slowing down.
I hadn't heard that till right now. Yeah, wow, that's insane.
Yeah, and also I think that when you compare their rosters, sorry guys, but comparing them to the White Sox and the Indians, I just really don't think either of those teams, at least right now, who knows what happens after they hit the waiver wire hard or make a few trades, but right now they just do not look like they can contend with those
And I do think
Motor City Kitties.
it's fair to mention, just to mention it out loud, that there aren't injuries programmed into this. So the simming and the substitutions and all those pieces would be too difficult. So it's not like a normal course of baseball where maybe your best player gets injured and somebody will creep up the standings. That will not happen in Legends League. So it is truly roster construction, monitoring hot streaks and who's doing well and what's working. But you're not going to get lucky.
Mickey Mantle's knees aren't going to explode.
Right, exactly. Yeah, Carlton
like
Fisk will be playing. Yeah, almost every game he can. Right.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. And so are you? So you're going with the Tigers, right, Hunter? That's your pick too.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. On to the AL West. Bring it on, Bobby.
All right, and I'm not just saying this because you're on the pod here, but I do think that your Athletics are gonna take this division.
Yes.
As we talked about earlier, you got screwed countless times in the draft, but you've been the most active at making maneuvers in the early going. I think you put in 5 waiver claims last week. We're doing weekly waivers and weekly changes in this league. But I know that you've been paying a lot of attention to the in-game morale system. Again, talking about getting players who are from California to play close to home. And I know that you've been researching a lot of actually how the algorithms that make this video game work actually work. And already your maneuvers have been paying dividends. And I think that attention to in-game detail, unless the other people in your division step up and start matching you with that, I think that it's going to be the difference maker.
Yeah, I'm gonna be contrarian and just this is what I hope for every year with Spencer, which never happens, but is hope for an over tinker. That those, dropping those players is going to somehow bite him in the butt. I'm actually, honestly, on just based on pure roster, I really like the Mariners in this division. Again, a lot of homegrown talent. They took Griffey first overall, which, you could argue 1 through 10, 1 through probably 18. But, it was just a fun first pick. And obviously for the Mariners and with some of those added bonuses in game, having Griffey and Edgar Martinez in the middle of your lineup is definitely going to cause some fits. And then for pitchers, Pedro Martinez, Christy Mathewson, Dwight Gooden, Lee Smith, Aroldis Chapman in the bullpen, one of the best left-handers in the game out of the bullpen. So it's going to be really, really hard to bet against that lineup and those pitchers. I just think he did a really good job of drafting. And again, maybe the in-game maintenance stuff is going to end up biting him. But I thought it was a really strong draft from Lou.
I think Lou's got that 80 want as well, and so I highly anticipate that Lou will be wheeling, dealing, and making his team a thorn in my side. But anyways, I don't know. I'm picking my team because it is my team, but I do think both of the teams that are in my division, one of which is run by my girlfriend, the Angels, and the Mariners, both have great teams. They both are like loaded with the top of their stats. Both have 2 or 3 99 pitchers, even though some of them aren't pitching to that right now. And they like disgusting lineups like we all have. And what I'm counting on is having a well-balanced roster. Like my team is pretty solid across the board, and I have been paying attention to some of the smaller stuff, and we'll see if it pays off. So I've kind of nominated myself, like I have in almost every fantasy league that we've ever played together in, as the guinea pig. Anyways, I think we are ready to wrap it up. So if you want to just remind everyone how they can access all of the Legends League content, I think that'd be worthwhile doing, and then we can sign off.
Absolutely. You can find us on Twitter at PFK The Show, at twitch.tv/PFK The Show, and also on YouTube. Search for PFK The Show. The URL is some nonsense garbage. One more thing I did want to throw out here at the end of the podcast is a weekly segment that I'd like to do, which is the commish tip of the week. From my perch sitting back watching everything, to kind of give one big piece of advice to all the managers at once. And after we've played through about 15 or 16 games here, my tip of the week for this week is react to your AI coach, but don't overreact to performance. So what we've seen so far in the early going is a lot of frustrating bullpen decisions, a lot of, pinch hits that should have happened but didn't, or pinch running that should have happened and didn't. And really, That's the kind of stuff that you want to be reacting to and adjusting your roster accordingly, because that's how it's going to be for this whole year. Don't expect that your AI version of Bob Melvin is all of a sudden going to start doing things the way you want him to, unless you adjust your roster in game to make that happen. However, I really caution everybody against overreacting to performance, because you look at someone like Babe Ruth hitting around the Mendoza line and think, oh, I got screwed with Babe Ruth. Like he wasn't worth my first round draft pick. Don't overreact to that yet. This is baseball. And if we've learned anything from years and years of fantasy baseball, it's that small sample sizes mean almost nothing. And this game, in my experience of playing MLB The Show for more than 10 years, is that small sample sizes don't mean anything. And that guy who is scuffling right now might end up your best hitter by the end of the year. That's what I got.
Great point. Anyways, this has been the inaugural episode of the Legends League podcast, and we are signing off. Sorry it was on the long side this time, but we'll try to keep it shorter from going forward.